shoving me. I would have thought I told you to go faster with your girlfriend's life on the line, big sis. Finley growled to herself and wished she knew a spell to make skulls spontaneously implode. Willem skipped a step to step, balancing only one hind hoof each time. She twirled and escaping the low ceiling from her outstretched wingtips. The staircase stinks really bad. Rats have died up there. I could smell the musk and rot. How can you stand it? My sense of smell isn't what it used to be. The rhythmic creaking in the wooden steps ceased. Seriously? You give up that too? I give up a lot of things. Some of them were even before I cursed myself. She wasn't even looking over her shoulder, but she didn't need to. She felt Willem's eye roll like if she was twisting some optimistic nerve herself. Oh, get it over yourself, big sis. There's no need to talk so overdramatic. Finley gritted her teeth. She lay nothing of what to be like suddenly reduced her physical senses to those mortal pony after decades of vampiric power. She remained silent on the stalk of losing her increased strengths. How normal pony speed and endurance had been taken months to get used to, and how returning the natural eye color had been inherited from her mother, who came with the feeling of blind for the night. For everything she had regained, sunlight, real food, and privacy on her own, had been the topmost on her list. She had not realized what living like a mortal actually meant until the curse was cast, and she was reduced to a mewling, weak bundle, barely able to stand up on their own. She pushed open the cockloft door, lifting her bodily into the attic. Willem flew up behind her. The sound of her feathers hitting the joist was loud and thunderclap to the small space. I take back. Up here smells way worse anyway. Dead rats and old worm vomit. She sniffed. Lots of old vomit. Vinley had cleaned up every time, but she never perfected in the way of recasting the curse without much pain that she threw up. By the teeth of the year, in the 10th year, she no longer passed out by throwing up was a constant, at least up here. Octavia could not smell it. Vinley couldn't smell anything more than dust, and she didn't doubt Willem's words. She crossed to the floor with eaves. The sky outside and the tiny window there was starry and beautiful. Vinley barely noticed that she unhooked to catch breath and pushed down towards the window wide. In a quick parasitic move, she swung herself out to the night and scrambled on top of the roof. She grabbed a hooffuls and unhatched to keep herself from falling to the street below and hauled herself up to the right place. Wing beats behind her signaled Vellum to follow. For a second there, I thought you were going to do something stupid. This house isn't huge, but if you're really as weak as a mortal, the kind of fall that could kill you. Vinley ignored her. Her horn ignited with the soft glow, extending her telekinesis. She dug into the straw, feeling around for a prize. Less than a minute, her magic touched the oilskin, and she pulled out tightly wrapped a round shape. Turning, she then slid the kind into the roof, and skidded right off to the end. One forehoof caught the window frame, and burst of telekinesis and propelled back into the attic. That was kind of impressive, Verlum observed. For a dumb mortal, Daddy would have been really unhappy if I let your brains go splat onto the ground after we spent all this time looking for you. She alighted with the floor. Standing up in cloud dust made her cough as she spoke. Is calf the book? Yes, Vinley stroked the slick oilskin, bound to the string that she had intentioned on herself to repel rodents. Willem approached the supreme confidence, steps not faltering, despite how Vinley's hackles visibly raised. She prolonged ramp down and tilted downward towards her face so their eyes were forced to meet. Vinley found herself staring at the maniac grin she had expected, but an expression that she had rarely seen on her sister's face before Willem looked. The only word that really fits was troubled. Big sis, I don't understand. Why did you leave us? Weren't we good enough for a family for you? Didn't you love us more? She bit her lower lip. Vinley was suddenly assaulted by the memory of a much younger, smaller Willem doing that when she came down home to an unsuccessful hunt, and worried that Voron would be mad at her. You just disappear. Poof, you're just gone, and I thought you were dead. You went out hunting one night and never came back. Daddy couldn't feel you anymore. I cried over you. I missed you. And Daddy, he got so mad when he thought you were dead. He was proud of you. He wanted you to find whoever killed you and rip them apart. For talking, that is, not just because he actually cares, Vinley thought. And instead, here you are, alive and living as moral, hobnobbing with the princesses at the royal weddings, and I don't understand why. A plaintive note etched Willem's voice into a wistful, far too young to whine. She then sounded like a fool keep asking about death for the first time, and not settling in the happy lie she was given. I wouldn't expect you to understand, Finley replied bluntly. She had spent too long and too much energy distancing herself to let all the watery eyes and childlike questioning resolve her now. She lowered her gaze, refusing to meet Willem's even when her sisters gripped her jaw to force her head level. Why not? You're so stupid. We're so much better than moral ponies, but you chose to live like one? You absolutely chose to be weak and slow and blind and deaf and prey? Incredibly disbelief, evidence that Verlum could never understand why Vinley's motivations. How do you explain the eagle how much better it is to give up on its claws and wings, the mastery of the skies, instead of to be a rabbit, living underground, fastered on by every predator out there? Finley remembered the scream of a half long ago, rabid as Verlum tore through its guts out and laughed, her heart chilled at the memory. I chose to be free. This isn't freedom. You had to chose to become one of Celestia's servants. And then there was another reason Voron had to come here. Even though worse than someone else taking his possessions, was one possessions choosing to belong to someone else. He would never see being an equestrian as being free. Celestia's ponies were possessions that she could not allow for his own flesh and blood. Should we go back to the basement? Veron's waiting. Daddy, Willem corrected. Veron! Daddy, if you even turn yourself immortal, it is still your blood in your veins, Vandilla. My mother's blood is in me too. She was moral, and one of Celestia's ponies. Vinley briefly lifted her gaze, allowing Vinlum a good look of her pink irises. She was named me Wintersong. Willem started back at her with abject disgust and absolutely no comprehension. You're so ungrateful. Ungrateful? Finley echoed, despite herself. Ungrateful for what? Taking me home? My life? Taking me away from my future? Killing my mother? For him giving you a better life and for a better future? For making you more than you were? For him, I'm giving you powers and abilities beyond anything you could have achieved for without him. For making you a part of something so much bigger than any ordinary pony, any ordinary life destined for an extraordinary death. Finley only sensed that they weren't just talking about her anymore. These didn't sound like Verulam's words. They were sounding pressurizing Veron. Her voice had climbed into a pitch as she spoke, tiny bits of spittle flying from her mouth as her words became more impassionable, and she was shouting directly in Finley's face. He made you. He made both of us. No. Finley worked so hard to keep her voice steady. She couldn't afford to let Venom fly off on the handle now. A flight up there would be a very bad thing for Octavia, as well as Vinley herself. Willem was a lot stronger and faster, and even if she lost control, she was prone to do so. She would not hold back until one of them was on the floor. No? Willem repeated. I made me. I am not Wintersong or Vandilla anymore. I'm Vinley Scratch. I chose his name because I chose his life. No pony gave it to me or forced it on me. These were my choices, and I'm going to live with them no matter what kind of loyalty you think I owe him. Sharing blood with some pony doesn't mean you owe them your life. Willem pressed her snouts together, growling deep with her throat. Vague innocence bathed her eyes. For a moment, Vinley had thought that she had pushed things too far, but Willem pulled away, as if an invisible piece of elastic had snapped her back afterwards. Come on, she snarled. Daddy's waiting for us. Vandilla had adopted a routine over the past 7 weeks. She attended to every one of Professor Orchard's twice-a-week magic classes. Afterwards, she would copy out her notes from a spidery neat hoof writing, while whatever music group followed the next class held their rehearsal. No pony ever told her to leave. In fact, many times the other ponies stayed to do their own work. It seemed as long as they don't talk, any pony and every pony was welcome to watch. Sometimes it was a jazz group. Sometimes the orchestra had played at the first night, and sometimes a choir, who was choir master, was excited and stopped them to yell every 30 seconds. When not attending classes or revising what she had learned, Vandilla let herself close into bookshops to help herself to the wares, hunted for a state of Veron's hunger to keep herself alive. The university campus proved to be a windfall for a lazy hunter, or who would rather spend her time reading practicing spells. The many party parties meant that there would be more drunken students whom nobody questioned when they would turn up unconscious during their trip home. She would skim to a few prints and several ponies all per night, enough to sustain herself and Veron without actually killing anyone. The alcohol in their blood had no adverse effect to vampire biology, and Veron was too preoccupied to his courting that if he noticed an extra tang in his meals, he never mentioned it. Magic was as fascinating as it was so intoxicating. There was so much more to being a unicorn than she ever considered to be herself. Intelligently, she had known about another mortal unicorn she could do more than just her magic than she did, but she had never considered her skills in the context of herself. Now a whole world of possibilities were beginning to open up for her. Her actual knowledge remained small, and she had applied with little what she had learned fear, and she would mess it up, and Veron would find out where she had been sneaking off to. Yet her desire to learn increased each day as she stashed a new book in a hidden stockpile away from their den. It was the 7th week, and that things changed. The orchestra was once again in session. Today was playing something bombastic that made Vandilla's hooves tap up as she scribbled. Sometimes she consulted her latest book to make sure that she had spelled every word correctly. The conductor tapped his stand, and when the orchestra came to the end of a reeling improvements that needed to be made and praised for individual musicians, in the lull shadow fell across Vandilla. She looked up to find Professor Orchard standing over her. She startled in her seat, and awkwardly cursing herself for not realizing that she was being watched. "You sure do get absorbed in your work," Professor Orchard observed mildly. "I've been watching you for a good 20 minutes, and you never so much as looked up once." Vandilla wasn't so sure what to say, since her first class had not been spoken directly to the new teacher. Words failed her now, morphing into a series of guttural noises that she might have been stabilized as before life was squeezed from them, her nervously convulsing her throat. Professor Orchard quirked an eyebrow. "Cat got your tongue?" Vandilla swallowed. "Sorry." "Why be sorry for not noticing me eyeballing you? There are much better things to be sorry for." The quirked eyebrow descended to become a part of the frown. "Sneaking into a magic class when you ain't a student, isn't it, for example?" A chill rushed down Vandilla's spine. 14 evening classes, Professor Orchard went on. An hour or two after each time where you would stay in this theater to do more studying. Yet I never seen you be one actual my classes. I thought that maybe you were just a plowing bad student, but that just didn't match up the way you had listened, so intentionally every word I had saying here in this room. Nor how you bury yourself in your work after we're done. I wish all my students that level of dedication. I wouldn't need to hold any evening classes at all if they did, so I checked the registers. They come with photos, you know. Didn't take long for me to look through them all. The white mare with the white mane, a white tail and the bright red eyes, ain't exactly easy to overlook. I'm willing to bet that you're the only albino pony in the whole university, except you aren't part of the university. Are you? Vandilla felt a hard, swallowed sand. She had to try to say something, but her mouth opened and closed around the thought. "No, not yet. Don't send me away." It was too soon. She wanted to learn more. She had thought that she could at least have until Veron made them move on from Trondheim. Professor Orchard stared over her, expression indescribable. Vandilla struggled to against the emotion clogging in her windpipe. You're what? A freeloader? A sneak-in thief? A claritation? Her face fell on her own upwards towards hooves. It was over. Her magical education had barely begun, and was already over. If she was lucky, she'd be allowed to leave and not having to run for it. Professor Orchard could not catch her at a full gallop. No moral pony could, but if she chooses to use her telekinesis, there was no guarantee Vandilla could escape that, vampiric strength or not. All of them, she whispered. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. The first time it was an accident. I got lost on campus and wandered by mistake. Well, sort of. But she didn't mean that part. And then I wanted to know more. I didn't finish school, and I didn't know any of this. She waved a foreleg at the notepad, bulging with paper-clipped worksheets, and some extra paper from past classes. I just wanted to know more. But you're right, it wasn't my place. I'm not a student here. Most students here have paid a lot of bits for their education. It doesn't seem very fair that you're doing it while you're waltzing a freeload of yours. I know. Vandilla rose to her hooves. I'll go. I won't come back either. No, don't be so hasty. She froze. Why? Professor Orchard shrugged. Tuesdays and Thursdays are catch-up lectures like this. My schedule is on weekdays. It's pretty darn full with other commitments. But how do Saturdays sit with you? I what? That eyebrow quirked up again, accompanied this time with a small smile. Weekdays are work days. Ain't no pony can tell me what I do on weekends, though. If I choose to spend a couple of days giving some pro bono tuition to promising and young magic user, then it's who's any pony to tell anyone else I can't. Vandilla could barely believe what she's hearing. You want to teach me? Tutor you at 1-1, at least for the lesson. I am curious to see what kind of aptitude you actually have. The material we've been given covering these classes ain't a beginner magic. If you ain't finished high school, I'd be curious to see how you coped with it. High school? She never been to any school. Her mother had taught her basic reading, writing, arithmetic, but there had been no school in their village. I had to read up on basics after the first class, she admitted, then go back and reread my notes. They made a lot more sense the second time around. Well, I see. The Professor Orchard clicked her tongue against the roof of her mouth. Saturday, my office. It's on the third floor on Star Swirl building in the middle of campus, 3 p.m. Vandilla's heart sank. I can't come in the daytime. Oh, my family. Oh, they don't know you're here? She shook her head. My father would never approve of this. He's kind of the reason why I ended up in that first class. I didn't mean to. I saw him with a lady friend and I wasn't supposed to, and then I mean, it was an accident. I didn't even know what this building was, let alone that you were running a class, but when I heard you teaching, I wanted to stay. I'm sorry. She had no idea why she had poured out so much. She clamped her jaws shut, in case her wagging tongue decided to just blurt out that she was a vampire, and the content to wait quietly in her seat, for the baying crowd led in the torches and pitchforks. There was that frown again. Professor Orchard would be prettier if she smiled more and frowned less, that she actual groove between her eyes from the ghosts and the frowns past. Interesting. All right, when can you come? Sunset. She let out a bark of laughter. Quite dramatic. Sunset it is. She stuck out her hoof, took a moment for Vandilla to realize that she was expected to shake it. Tentatively she did so, but froze up again when Professor Orchard stopped and stared out at her again. It would seem appropriate for you to give me your name. I can't go on calling you that albino mare who likes magic on music. V? V? Yes, that's what I go by. It's short for my real name. And what is your new real name? I just prefer just V. And I prefer to win the lottery on the lounge without eating grapes while a handsome stallion rubs my tired hooves, but that ain't gonna happen either. Vandilla then bit her lip, advertised her face. She let go of her hooves, still trying to shake their tears. Then I'll have to thank you for the offer. But I can't take it. I'm sorry. She got up. I'll leave now. She got past the Professor Orchard and was halfway up the stairs to the exit when the older mare's voice brought to her halt. Well, all right then, V. What? Sunset on Saturday. Professor Orchard trotted away, as if completely disinterested at the fact that she had just changed another pony's life. Don't be late, and be ready by trying casting Pearl Shine's energy manipulation spell from today's class. There will be a practical test. These classes are all ain't good, but they do lead themselves to practical work. And that's just darn important as which researchers researched on when and what they're called. Once we get done researching. Vandula stood in stunned silence while the orchestra began to play once more.